Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Spy is on the U.S. sanctions list. He isn't allowed to be in the United States without special permission. He's listed on the Department of the Treasury's blocked persons list. So why was he here meeting with U.S. government officials? Well, according to the Washington Post, 2 top Russian spy chiefs traveled to Washington last week to discuss counterterrorism issues with CIA Director Mike Pompeo. But the unusual visit also raised concerns among some U.S. officials that Moscow could interpret the encounter as a sign the Trump administration is willing to move beyond the issue of election interference. Chuck Schumer has his own concerns about the visit, and he's demanding answers.
This is a serious national security issue. Russia hacked our elections. We sanctioned the head of their foreign intelligence. And then the Trump administration invites him to waltz through our front door. This is an extreme dereliction of duty by President Trump, who seems more intent on undermining the rule of law in this country than standing up to Putin.
And if you listen to the Russians, no biggie. Here's how the Russian ambassador to the U.S. explained it in state media. Quote, contacts between special services continued even at the most difficult times. Politics will be politics, but everyday work will be everyday work. There are political slogans, but there is also some real work to do. The panel's still here. John Hallman, I mean, the real work of the Russian spy agency was to meddle with our politics.
Yes.
So why are we meeting with them? Can't we coordinate our Syrian air strategy over the phone?
Yes, we could.
Is it a coincidence that we're not going to enforce our sanctions?
No, it's certainly not. That's certainly not a coincidence. I mean, look, it's the evidence. I mean, we went through this thing yesterday where we talked about all of the various connections between the various nefarious, ugly-looking, incriminating connections between Trump and Russia over the course of the last 2 years that are just facts, not conspiracy theories, not part of some dossier. And this week, almost forgotten in all of this other stuff that's happened, including the State of the Union, is the fact that we're not going to enforce those Russian sanctions, which is an extraordinary thing. Right. Just an extraordinary thing. And now this. I have no theory about what this is about. I have no idea. But it is so much part, as humans, we do pattern recognition. It is so much consistent with the large pattern of the odd, disturbing, cozying up to Russia that has happened from the moment Donald Trump stood on the national stage all the way up to this very day as he sits there in the White House.
Yeah, I mean, my 6-year-old does patterns, apple, apple, banana, apple. This is like love, 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 Vladimir Putin. I mean, and let me just say, in disclosure, my husband works in sanctions as they pertain to Iran. This is not a president who doesn't believe in economic sanctions for our enemies. He doesn't believe Russia is an enemy.
You literally have Mike Pompeo telling the BBC on Monday, Russia intends to affect the midterm elections. He said this to the BBC, and now he's letting the spies. Look, if this were a bad action movie, I would have left the theater by now. You would think they're sticking jump drives in his laptop whenever he goes to the bathroom. Because if you let the spy agency in that is directly responsible for affecting our elections on the same day that the president says, I'm not going to put through the sanctions that my own Republican-led Senate voted for. Clearly, we've just handed away our power. We have handed away our sovereignty.
Well,
it's ridiculous.
Let me ask you a question, Charlie Sykes, because we talk about the Mueller investigation as though it has now been reduced to an obstruction of justice investigation. Right. But we also wonder aloud whether the obstruction of justice is ongoing. Might the collusion also be ongoing?
Well, we know that the attack is ongoing, and that's the thing that's most about it. We know that the Russians are attacking our democracy. So the CIA director says...
Don't believe you. I think we have Pompeo saying that.
Well,
let's watch Pompeo. He thinks so, too.
This threat's not going to go away. The Russians have been at this a long time, and I fully expect they'll continue to be at it.
Do you have concerns that they might try and interfere in the U.S. midterms, which are coming up?
Of course. I have every expectation that they will continue to try and do that, but I'm confident that America will be able to have a free and fair election that will push back in a way that is sufficiently robust that the impact they have on our election won't be great.
Okay, now what's extraordinary about that is that in explaining why they did not impose the sanctions earlier this week, the administration said that the law, just passing the law, was already having a deterrent effect. Well, then you have the CIA director saying that apparently they have not been deterred from continuing to attack our democratic process. So clearly, it is not having the effect of at least protecting it. And again, you step back from all this Mueller investigation, the bottom line is that should this be a partisan issue? The President of the United States, the number one responsibility is to protect the national security of this country. We are under attack from the Russians, and this administration at every single turn downplays it, minimizes it, and lies about what's been going on.
At what point, Zerlina, do we stop pretending that there's a question about Donald Trump's affinity for Putin? And at what point do we really just
stop that about a year ago?
I stopped doing that. I mean, but seriously, why do we have to act like there's something we don't know? I mean, we know that Donald Trump has harsher things to say about Jeff Sessions than Vladimir Putin. Right. We know that Donald Trump has used that rose garden to lash out at people in his own cabinet more often than he has ever lashed out at a foreign adversary. We know that he's for sanctions because he's really for re-upping them against Iran, where there's really mixed, open question about whether or not they're complying with the nuclear. So he's not anti-sanction. He's anti-sanctions against Russia. Right. We know why, right?
Absolutely, we know why. I mean, like John, I have not been asking those questions all year. I think I'm waiting for more facts. I take the new facts and I place them up against all of the facts that we know. So every single time there's a new revelation about Russia, it sometimes as a regular human hard to keep up. But somebody like us, we're nerds. We're dissecting all of it. And so when you learn new information, it's really important to look back at what we already knew. And every single time you learn something new about a new meeting with a Russian, a new contact with a Russian, you put that up against what was happening at the time in the campaign, and it looks even more suspicious than it would have already if the meeting was independent of anything else going on. And so I think that there's something there. Donald Trump is clearly trying to cover up something.
It is Thursday, February 1st of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and it is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, folks. It's a little spicy jambalaya, that's right. Can't get much spicier than a Russian spy meeting with the head of the CIA and other Trump officials, and he's not even supposed to be here. I don't know. Why would he be? It seems to me that maybe the collusion is ongoing. Indeed. Well, that was a fairly long clip, so I better get right into it about what we will be attending to today. On the rest of the menu, the congressional staffer who drafted the controversial Nunes Memo was once bench-slapped. You like that? Bench-slapped by a federal judge for ineptitude. Yeah. So apparently Nunes did cop to Adam Schiff's accusation that the memo had been altered after the vote. Okay, well, we'll see how that turns out. Democratic minority on the committee would like to have another vote because they're giving a product to the White House that wasn't voted on out of committee. Sounds like a procedural delay, but when you're in the minority, you do what you can do. U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin urged Congress to raise the debt ceiling as another shutdown looms. Does Trump know? And the Pennsylvania Senate President pro tempore told the state Supreme Court he will ignore its anti-gerrymandering order. Sounds like contempt to me. After the break, we'll move to the chef's table to investigate why Trump seeks to gut energy programs with the highest potential for job creation. And Trump's State of the Union was even more fascist than you realize. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Dansez maintenant sous l'été, les pieds nus dans le sable. Dansez maintenant et jetez vos ennuis dans les vagues qui dansent.
All right, first up here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is by Travis Geddes out of Raw Story. You know, this Trump crew, if they could be any more inept, well, can they? I think these are the records that are being set. Forget about how many people watched his State of the Union, which was, what, 5th, 6th on the list? He says it's number 1. I think they are breaking records for ineptitude. Ineptitude that is also doubled with an intent desire to destroy everything around them that has what they would call a liberal quality. Indeed. Well, Kash Patel, a top Nunes staffer and senior counsel for the House Intelligence Committee, traveled to London last summer to question the former British spy who wrote the Trump-Russia dossier. It's not a dossier. God, I hate that. Christopher Steele didn't write a dossier. He put together a work product pretty much in its raw state. Okay? Let's be clear. Patel and another Nunes staffer, Doug Presley, went on the research mission without notifying the U.S. Embassy or the British government. Well, they also failed to inform the committee's ranking Democrat, Adam Schiff, or GOP Rep. Mike Conaway, who took over the panel's Russia probe after Nunes stepped aside over ethics concerns. Well, now we know he never stepped aside. And sending Patel over to London is another example of how he did not step aside. The pair, along with Intel Committee staffers Damon Nelson and Andrew House, wrote most of the memo the White House and House Republicans claims exposes FBI wrongdoing and justifies ending the special counsel investigation into Russian campaign interference. I love what they consider the FBI to have done wrong. A lot of it is that the Trump White House is accusing the FBI of going after Hillary so terribly. And this is the guy that stood up on the podium through his whole campaign and led the chants of lock her up. Yeah, very convenient, isn't it? Patel was issued a rare order of ineptitude in 2016 by U.S. District Judge Lynn Hughes, who faulted the lawyer's handling of the prosecution of Omar Faraj Saeed al-Hardan, who was accused of trying to support ISIS. If the pretentious lawyers from Maine Justice knew what they were doing or had the humility to ask for help from the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Texas, Hughes wrote, it would not have taken 3 days, 7 telephone calls, 3 voicemail messages, and 1 snippy electronic message for them to indirectly ask the court for assistance in ordering a transcript. The judge told the ABA Journal that he could not discuss the order because the case was still pending, but Hughes thought his bench slap was clear. If the order is not self-explanatory, I failed, the judge said. He had admonished Patel from the bench after he arrived in court shortly after a flight without proper attire. Wow, my cousin Vinny. You're not a member of the trial team, Hughes said. It's been going on for a month or so, and you have not been here, have you? And where's your tie, the judge said. Where's your suit? Hughes then demanded Patel's passport to prove he'd just arrived from an overseas flight, and he asked why he'd been chosen to participate if there were other prosecutors nearby in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Indeed, why was he there? What is the utility to me and to the people of America to have you fly down here at their expense, eat at their expense, and stay at their expense when there are plenty of other people capable in this room and in that room over there? You're just one more non-essential employee from Washington. You don't add a bit of value, the judge added. Do you? Other lawyers said they'd never heard an attorney slap so hard from the bench. It was just a slap in the face is what it is. South Texas law professor Jeffrey Korn told the Houston Chronicle, when you are a judge, you get the prerogative of saying what you feel and putting it in a ruling of ineptitude. I've never seen anything like that. And the Washington Post described the spectacle as a Texas-sized bollocking over proper attire, wasting taxpayer money, and spying for the bureaucrats in Washington.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
All right, next offering here in the Bistro Cafe is out of Reuters by David Morgan, Susan Heavey, and Will Dunham. I will reveal that I'm not terribly pleased with the reporting here. It's a little too, I don't know, how shall we say, objective? Can something be too objective? I suppose it can be so objective that it really doesn't communicate what the hell is going on. But it is reportage nonetheless, done in, the traditional style. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin on Wednesday called on the Republican-controlled Congress to lift the federal debt limit as soon as possible so the government can pay employee benefits and other obligations. Seems to me that they're just running on the business model that Trump has instituted, where you do not pay your debts or other obligations. In a letter to congressional leaders and key committee chairmen, Mnuchin said the Treasury Department would continue to suspend payments into federal employee, retiree, health, and disability funds through February 28th. Congress must raise the nation's debt ceiling to avoid a government default. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has estimated that the U.S. Treasury would exhaust its borrowing options and could run out of funds to pay its bills by late March if lawmakers do not act. Actually, I think we could probably get a lot of money from the Russians like Donnie does, except you'll have to run it through Deutsche Bank and they'll take their cut first. Well, the Congressional Budget Office on Wednesday moved up its projection for when the Treasury will likely run out of cash to the first half of March, citing lower government revenues after the Republican overhaul of the U.S. tax system in December. Who could have forecast that event? The CBO had previously expected Treasury to exhaust its options in late March or early April. Okay. The request comes as Congress is already wrestling with federal spending for the current fiscal year and faces the possibility of another government shutdown with approved funding due to run out on February 8th. Pretty good on it. It's only 7 days away. Now, this is the part that I get a little, peeved about. Thanks to deep party political divisions and intra-party squabbles, that's one way of putting it. Now, I see one side who is actively involved in tearing down every institution that we have in the United States, transferring wealth to the upper, 0.0000000000000000001%. And we have the other side that has an obsessive duty to protect the institutions of America, its legacy, and to continue the great experiment. And that dynamic has been reduced to, what is it now? Deep partisan political divisions and intra-party squabbles. Yeah. I suppose if you shrunk the dynamic of the Civil War down into its essence, it was really nothing more than an intra-party squabble. Partisan political divisions and intra-party squabbles. And millions died. Okay. Lawmakers have passed a series of short-term funding bills after all these political divisions and inter-party squabbles since the fiscal year that began last October 1st, but have been unable to agree on spending for the rest of the year, which ends September 30th. The federal government shut down earlier this month for 3 days when Republicans and Democrats failed to find common ground. Well, one reason that Republicans and Democrats failed to find common ground is that the Republicans held the ground and they refused to share it with the Democrats. In his later dated January 30th, Mnuchin urged members of the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives to, quote, protect the full faith and credit of the United States by acting to increase the statutory debt limit as soon as possible, end quote. The request was released publicly yesterday. Mnuchin is scheduled to meet with Donald Trump later in the day. The Treasury Department's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Financial Markets, Clay Berry, said in a separate statement the department can fund the government through the end of February 28th, the shortest month of the year. Last offering here at the Bistro Cafe on Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of Think Progress by Ian Millhiser. Now, if something walks like contempt, talks like contempt, smells like contempt, and ignores Marbury versus Madison, I think it's contempt. Okay. In an audacious move by a political leader who could potentially be held in contempt of court, Pennsylvania Senate President pro tempore Joseph Scarnati, Repug, informed the state Supreme Court yesterday that he will openly defy one of the court's recent orders in a gerrymandering case. They can never win outright. They always have to game the system and cheat. On January 22nd, the state Supreme Court struck down the state's gerrymandered congressional maps, which enable the GOP to win 13 of the state's 18 congressional districts, even in years when the Democrats won the statewide popular vote. That order explained that the maps must be composed of compact and contiguous territory and must not divide any county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward except where necessary to ensure the quality to ensure the equality of the population. It also gave the legislator until February 9th to draw new maps, and the governor until February 15th to approve the maps and submit them to the court for review. Now, we must remind ourselves, this great experiment is really held together by really nothing more than gossamer thin threads of belief, faith, duty, and honor. Gossamer thin. It's just a thought, a belief. And we have now a party who wants to destroy that belief of duty, honor. If either deadline is not met, the court shall proceed expeditiously to adopt a plan based on the evidentiary record developed in the Commonwealth Court. 4 days after its initial order on January 26th, the court issued a subsequent order requiring the legislature to turn over certain data, including geolocation files that contain the current boundaries of all Pennsylvania municipalities and precincts, and various reports analyzing how well the legislators' proposed new maps comply with the court's January 22nd order. In a letter from his legal counsel, Scarnati explicitly refuses to comply with the second order, though the letter claims that, quote, the General Assembly is currently advancing bills aimed at creating an alternative map, end quote. The letter also states that, quote, Senator Scarnati will not be turning over any data identified in the court's orders. Well, I think it's probably time to maybe send the Sergeant-at-Arms over to Scarnati and bring him to court in handcuffs until we can figure out what the hell is going on. Well, maybe he's got some sort of congressional type immunity. We were in debate on this. Scarnati's stated reason for his defiance in his belief that the court's January 22nd order violates the U.S. Constitution's Elections Clause. Okay, this is what you get when you get a bunch of Federalist Society lawyers going to work. Last week, Scarnati sought a stay of the January 22nd order from the Supreme Court of the United States, claiming that only the state legislature, not the state courts, are constitutionally allowed to weigh in on questions of gerrymandering. Now, of course, that conservative Supreme Court has not yet ruled on the stay request, which means that both the January 22nd order and the January 26th order remain binding on Scarnati. It's like putting money in an escrow account when you have a complaint about your landlord. I'm not going to pay my rent until he rectifies the problem. Well, you still got to put your rent money into an escrow account to show good faith. Scarnati's request for a stay also conflicts with the U.S. Supreme Court's 2015 decision in Arizona State Legislature versus Arizona Independent Redistrict Commission. And it is also difficult to square with the court's landmark 1803 decision. This is it, Marbury versus Madison, which held that it is emphatically the province and duty of the Judicial Department to say what the law is. Not this Scarnati guy, and not his little snotty-nosed Federalist Society intern lawyers. Let's be clear. Okay, let's get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world and finish up at the chef's table. And you are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, if Epicurus had considered film, The coming-of-age convention is a common one for a director who wants to tell an existential story, but Luca Guadagnino's screen adaptation of the 2007 novel, Call Me By Your Name, takes the device to a new level. The story picks up with an American, Elio, son of an antiquities professor, beginning his 17th summer in a villa in the northern Italian countryside of 1983. He spends his time reading, playing the piano, and socializing with similarly aged locals. It's going to be great. But right about then, Elio's dad announces that a graduate assistant, Oliver, would be joining them for the summer, displeasing Elio, who must now vacate his bedroom for the visitor. Oliver, played by Armie Hammer, is 25, visually stunning, and as smart as he is attractive. Though Elio is dating a local girl and Oliver is cautious for professional reasons and has an interest in women as well, the two begin an intense physical relationship, one we all know has an expiration date. Timothy Chalamet stunningly shepherds the Elio character through the adolescent angst of the summer, not ending actually until the winter holidays. At that point, we get an extended shot of his face with the sound of a crackling fire, which marks the turning of a chapter of life, not merely the end of a movie. Another performance of note is that of Michael Stolbarg as Elio's accepting dad, whose confessional monologue near the finale is worth the price of admission. Everything works together here, and it's all beautiful, literally. Beautiful scenery, beautiful food and wine, beautiful bodies, both of the living and the long dead, as in the recovered statues that hold the professors in Oliver's academic interest. Those with such an interest in film are already in awe of Call Me By Your Name, and you will be too. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
The fires that ripped across Napa and Sonoma last year damaged some 24 wineries and burned others completely to the ground.
Yeah, and also don't forget Chile burned pretty good this year too. In fact, the fires there destroyed quite a few old vineyards.
Wes Sandberg, an analytical chemist at the University of British Columbia at the Okanagan campus, right in BC's wine country.
Basically, this is a problem in North and South America this year.
Even wineries that are unscathed by fire may suffer from smoke passing through the vineyards because it can leave that year's vintage with unpleasant smoky notes. Sandberg and his team studied that process with an experimental plot of Cabernet Franc vines, 5 of which they exposed to wood smoke and 5 they left alone. What they found was when volatile compounds and smoke land on the grapes, the fruit very quickly sucks the chemical into its skin or flesh, and then it tags sugar molecules onto the smoky compounds, which renders the smoky substances water-soluble and non-toxic. But that chemical conversion leaves the compounds with no scent or taste, which means winemakers can't detect them in grapes until it's too late.
When you take a bunch of grape juice and expose it to yeast during the fermentation process, the yeast have the required enzymes to cleave that sugar from the smoke-flavored compounds. And so it kind of unmasks them during fermentation,
making them once again detectable by nose and tongue. The findings are in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. This study was funded in part by a local chemical testing company, which hopes to develop a test for various smoky substances in the grapes to predict whether so-called smoke taint will be a perceptible problem in the finished wine. Till then, Sandberg has this advice for wildfire-affected winemakers.
One obvious strategy for minimizing smoke taint in wine is don't put it in a toasted oak barrel. That's just going to put more compounds in there that give that odor or flavor.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
What happens when the police use less deadly force, make fewer arrests, and stop engaging in unconstitutional stop and frisk?
My name is Ramsey Clark, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
In 1990, there were 2,245 killings in New York City. As of the end of December 2017, there were 286, a reduction of 87%. 87%! When New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio ran for that office on a pledge to stop and frisk, that's the police practice of stopping and frisking persons, disproportionately people of color, for no legitimate law enforcement reason, his opponents claimed that to retreat from stop and frisk would create mayhem in the streets. But they were wrong. No such thing happened. In fact, quite the opposite. crime, especially serious crime, has gone down. A lot. De Blasio and Police Commissioner James P. O'Neill credit the crime reduction to focusing police activity on gangs and repeat offenders and building trust in communities. The history and the data demonstrate that adherence to constitutional Fourth Amendment principles regarding search and seizure is good for the community, good for the police, and good for making the city safer for everyone.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. The founders of our nation believed that the right to hold and express one's beliefs was essential if citizens were to participate in the affairs of government. There are many benefits to freedom of expression. For example, freedom of expression promotes individual development and human dignity. It is important for your growth as a person to have the right to present your ideas and to consider other points of view. Your dignity as a person should be respected by allowing you the freedom to say what you think and to hear what others think. Another benefit is the advancement of knowledge. It is easier for new discoveries to be made when ideas can be discussed freely. Even if you disagree with someone, that person may say something that helps you test your knowledge and increase your understanding. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour special report recorded on Wednesday, January 31st, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. In the UK, wages for public employees have been effectively frozen for the past 7 years. That has resulted, given inflation and other factors, in a reduction of almost 20% in real wages for many workers in the public service. Unions in the country are fighting to improve the wages and working conditions as best they can. One of those unions is PCS, the Public and Commercial Services Union. PCS has about 200,000 members. I talked to PCS General Secretary Mark Serwotka about wages in the country's public service.
The issue of pay in the British civil service, of the PCS members that we represent, is now at a crisis point. We have done a lot of internal research, and that research found that the average pay of a PCS member in real terms is 20% less value now than it was in 2010. And that's because as pay has stood still, inflation has risen, our pension contributions have gone up, our national insurance costs have actually gone up. So people now are actually 1/5 worse off for doing a very, very hard job, because they deliver frontline services on behalf of the UK government. And what that has meant is in a sector where pay is notoriously low, we have people in the UK in the civil service on less than £20,000 a year. It has meant many people have had to take second jobs, people don't have holidays, people struggle to make ends meet as their cost of living rises, but the value of their pay packet has actually decreased. And when you think that what these people are doing is paying benefits out to the vulnerable, collecting the taxes that keeps this country going, keeping our borders secure, running our transport system, providing everyday frontline services, and the government says they value them so lowly that they're cutting their already low pay by 20%, it is completely unacceptable. And it has had a real effect on morale. It has had an effect on people making ends meet. And this problem needs to be addressed urgently.
What does PCS think should be a fair pay rise for its members?
So the pay claim that we've just submitted to the government is that all members should have a 5% pay rise this year with a minimum underpinning of £1,200, whichever is the greater. And we believe that that actually is a very modest claim. It is modest because all that does is it matches the rate of inflation, and it gives people a small amount extra to help start clawing back the 20% that they've lost in real terms over the last 7 years. And that's the demand that we put to the government. And we're saying to them, anything less than that, anything less than the rate of inflation, will be yet a further cut in people's living standards. And actually, we believe that if the government don't address that our members have given us a very clear mandate that they are prepared to fight for decent pay this year. And at the end of 2017, we held a consultative ballot of our members in the UK, and on the highest turnout in the union's history, we had a 99% yes vote that people supported an above-inflation pay rise, and an 80% yes vote saying they would be prepared to take industrial action if the government didn't agree.
Unions never take industrial action lightly because it involves sacrifices by its members, especially financial sacrifices. What is PCS doing to help alleviate some of the financial pressure on people if the union embarks on actions such as strikes?
We recognise that because of the low pay of the members that we have, that for many of them, taking strike action is going to be very, very difficult. So as an attempt to make us battle ready, we're asking all members to consider making a small donation into a fighting fund that would allow us to have the financial means to give backing to those members if they're called on to take strike action. And we're aware that in the UK, massive unions like Unite or Unison have fighting funds that run to tens of millions of pounds. We are a smaller union and don't have that type of money freely available, so we're attempting to raise this voluntarily, along with other internal measures, to make us battle ready.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From United Nations headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. While most Americans weighed in on President Trump's State of the Union address as it happened, the world is now having its say. A top official in the Japanese cabinet said Wednesday the island nation appreciated Trump's strong words directed to North Korea, including the following lines.
North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear missiles could very soon threaten our homeland. We are waging a campaign of maximum pressure to prevent that from ever happening.
China had a very different take on Trump's remarks. A foreign ministry spokesperson condemned Trump's Cold War mentality when it came to global crises and his zero-sum ideology on issues such as trade. In his remarks, Trump described China as a rival that challenges American interests, the American economy, and values, and he seemed to threaten further tariffs against China for stealing American intellectual property.
The era of economic surrender is totally over. We will protect American workers and American intellectual property through strong enforcement of our trade rules.
And a new United Nations report has identified 22 American companies doing business in illegal Israeli settlements in the Palestinian West Bank. Those companies have yet to be named until the UN can contact each one individually, but that hasn't stopped the Israeli government from slamming the report. Israel's UN ambassador said Wednesday it was shameful the blacklist was published on the same day the UN is officially commemorating Holocaust remembrance. The UN Human Rights Council is tasked with documenting business activity in what's known as the occupied Palestinian territories. A total of 206 companies, the vast majority of them Israeli, met those criteria in this year's review. For more global news headlines, visit talkmedianews.com. Thank you for accompanying us to the chef's table here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro. Shrimp and grits, Thursdays. That's right. Okay, we'll start off with a palate cleanser, which is always weather from around the world, and we begin along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America. It is currently 38 degrees. We are going to be a little warmer today, going up to 60. We'll have a low of 45 tonight. No chance of rain today, a slight chance of rain tonight. But then tomorrow, we will be going up to 65 degrees and bouncing between 65 and 70 for the upcoming week with little chance of rain. So we'll see. For us, winter is not quite over yet, and we may be getting snow on Easter. It could happen. Okay, let's see. Pressure is at 30.22 inches. Visibility is at 10 miles, gone up. And humidity is at 75%, so a little bit of humidity has come down. Air quality is only moderate at 56 parts per million. If you got breathing problems, I would suggest, stay inside. Filter your air somehow. Okay, so weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people live around the world. London is 45 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 47 and partly cloudy, and they have a wind advisory that could disrupt electrical infrastructure. Rome, Italy is under the same wind advisory. They are 56 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 35 and cloudy. Kabul is 32 and fair. Hong Kong is 52 and cloudy. Tokyo is 33 with snow, but I think they're going down to 25. They are under a winter advisory warning currently. Sydney, Australia, in the dead of their summer, is 61 degrees and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California, is 53 and partly cloudy. And New York, is 37 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people live around the world. All right, this offering here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Joe Rome out of Think Progress. Donald Trump has reportedly decided to escalate his war on clean energy, the world's biggest new source of sustainable high-wage employment. You know, the 30% tariff on goods like wind turbine propellers, those kinds of things. Solar panels. That wasn't enough. The White House now wants to cut the Energy Department's $2 billion energy efficiency and renewable energy program by a whopping 72%. Last year, Trump proposed to cut the EERE budget by 66%, but any cuts were thwarted by the inability of the Republican-led Congress to pass a budget. The U.S. government has been funded by continuing resolutions that freeze spending at existing levels. Gee, I don't know, maybe it'll be frozen on February 8th. Meanwhile, China has budgeted more than $70 billion a year for renewable generation alone through 2020. Beijing calculates the resulting employment will be more than 13 million people. In this country, clean energy jobs outnumber fossil fuel jobs by more than 2.5 to 1 and have been the fastest growing sectors. But Trump has been waging a war on clean energy jobs for over a year now, including his plans to withdraw the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement and repeal the EPA's Clean Power Plan. Jesus. He even tried to get federal regulators to raise consumer energy bills in order to subsidize coal and nuke power plants. Most recently, Trump slapped a 30% tariff on imported solar cells and panels, which puts at risk tens of thousands of jobs installing solar, especially in the states that voted for him. Let's remember, a grifter hates a rube. Those who voted for him are no more than rubes. While EERE is only about 7% of the overall $28 billion Energy Department budget, it has the highest documented rate of return to taxpayers of any federal research and development program. One National Academy of Sciences study found that an $11 million investment in a handful of energy efficiency technologies returned over $30 billion in energy savings. Now, Trump cannot stop the global clean energy revolution, which will generate millions and millions of jobs in the coming decades, but he certainly could slow the revolution in this country while ensuring countries like China gets the lion's share of those jobs. Maybe that's the plan.
Dansez maintenant. Tout l'été, vous serez des cigales qui dansent, balancent au gré du vent léger. Quand l'hiver sera venu, vous prend au dépourvu. Vous danserez main dans la main et attendons l'été prochain. Dansez maintenant, tout l'été, aimez-vous sur le sable. Dansez maintenant.
Finishing up here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is an article out of Raw Story by Travis Geddes. Donald Trump praised a New Mexico police officer in his State of the Union address for adopting a heroin addict's baby. But a historian noticed some disturbing parallels in the anecdote. Trump highlighted Albuquerque police officer Ryan Holitz, who, while on duty in September, encountered a pregnant homeless woman as she prepared to inject heroin. Sounds cinematic. When Ryan told her she was going to harm her unborn child, she began to weep, Trump said. She told him she did not know where to turn, but badly wanted a safe home for her baby in that moment. Ryan said he felt God speak to him. You will do it because you can, God commanded in his fevered brain, in this reporter's opinion. He took out a picture of his wife and their 4 kids. Then he went home to tell his wife, Rebecca. In an instant, she agreed to adopt, and the Holitz named their new daughter Hope. I'm a little confused here. They adopted this kid from September, and now here it is just the beginning of February, and they were able to finalize the adoption? I don't get it. Just because this guy's a cop, he gets to be vetted and pushed through quickly? It doesn't make any sense. But it's still a heartwarming story. Ryan and Rebecca, you embody the goodness of our nation, the president added. Thank you and congratulations. Now, historian Angus Johnson could not help but notice the contrast between the language Trump used to tell that story and his rhetoric against Latino and other immigrants brought to the United States as children. They were all MS-13, of course, you know that. In the context of the full speech of Trump's presidency, this story is a question and an answer, Johnson said. What do we do with the children of those we despise? If they're brown, we expel them from our land. If they are white, we take them for ourselves. Now, the City University of New York professor paid attention to the details of Trump's speechwriters chose to omit from Holitz's story, and those they chose to highlight. We don't know what process was followed in this adoption, Johnson said. We don't know where the mother of the child is now, how she is doing, what her relationship with her kid is. Trump's people could have said. They chose not to. they chose to erase her. Johnson drew a parallel between the presidential anecdote and the history of Los Desaparecidos, or the disappeared. Argentinians who vanished after a military junta took over in 1974, and many of the political prisoners' babies were stolen and given to party loyalists. The children of subversives were seen as seeds of the evil tree. Perhaps through adoption, those seeds could be replanted in healthy soil. Johnson pointed out the baby's mother was still homeless as of December and not in contact with her child or adoptive family. And the historian was disturbed by the way Trump wrote the woman out of her own story. The erasure was not accidental, Johnson said. It wasn't merely rhetorical. It was ideological. It was an expression of the specific kind of ethno-natalism we've seen before. It is fascist. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be back tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Still got a little bit of that blood moon lingering, so it ought to be quite a gravitational event. So join us then. Got great content throughout the rest of the day at Netroots Radio, so do stay tuned. Tom Hartman coming up about 6 minutes after the hour, followed by Amy Goodman and Democracy Now!, and then followed by Randy Rhodes. Takes us through the afternoon, and then later on in tonight, we'll have Malloy for a couple of hours of, well, fantastic ranting. Who can do it best? So do stay tuned. And we will visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.